Lone Wolf, Alpha Squad, copy, over, by Chapter 19, Super Soldier Talk. 2011, I was working with Max Spears in a series of meditations to end my labs and create a parallel reality in which super soldiers and my labs would get the attention and respect they deserve for their experiences in a very public way. Max Spires was another super soldier who had monarch type experiences similar to James Casbolt while growing up in the UK. In September 2011, I used what little money I had saved to fly to LA to bring Max to Project Camelot's Awake and Aware 2011 in Irvine, California. I paid for everything in exchange for a promised interview about his experiences. During the conference, we meet Lorraine Fenton, who told us she was planning on putting on a super soldier conference in San Francisco the next year. She invited us to come on stage alongside with Duncan O'Finioan. However, Duncan pulled out of this event because he thought we super soldiers were fake. After the conference, I stayed in Max's disgusting studio apartment in Los Angeles. His bed was a thin mat on the floor with a dirty sheet and dirty pillow. There was a beat-up couch, a laptop, a lamp, dirty dishes in the sink, and a Templar crest on the wall, but not much more. I was very tempted to buy him some sheets and towels, but I was only going to stay a night, and I had my own sleeping bag and pillow, so I was happy to have a place that was a step up from camping. He told me he worked part-time as a substitute teacher for the school system, but based on what I was seeing at the time, I don't think he was employed or was even capable of holding a job. When Max and I talked about our experiences, he began to channel an entity which must have been either Draco or Anunnaki. I was unable to understand what was being said. On my last day with Max, we were scheduled to film later that evening, but Max was having much difficulty writing down notes of what to say. Later that afternoon, he started smoking pot to calm his nerves. Then some of his friends stopped by and they spent a few hours in the bathroom smoking something really hardcore. During this time, I was focused on setting up my camera rig and reviewing my questions. It was only later I realized Max decided to ditch his interview to get stoned instead. Max's druggy friends did not leave until very late that night. At this point, he was so stoned, it would have served no good to film him. The next day, I had returned home very upset that Max had taken advantage of my kindness and left me with a bunch of travel expenses and no work to show for it. Max never apologized for what he did to me. Looking back, I understand the drugs and the mind control were driving him to do what he did. This was also a learning experience for me now. I only want to work with experiences who are actively seeking to improve their lives and the lives of others around them. In June 2012, Lorraine Fenton's Super Soldier Summit was scheduled to take place in San Francisco. A listener of Super Soldier Talk graciously opened his house near the event location so that I could have a place to stay prior to the conference without having to pay for a hotel. Max and Tyler Clark, who were also scheduled speakers at this event, also needed a place to stay, so I convinced our host to allow the three of us to camp out in his home. During our stay, we had some fun on a side trip to San Francisco, and later that evening, Max channeled something about his being brothers and working together in Space Command for a time. I forgot what Max had done. During the conference, Max became more and more manic. He would stammer his words and bounce his legs like he was on drugs. Wow. During the conference, Max became more and more manic. He would stammer his words and bounce his legs like he was on drugs. After the conference, Max began to black out. Lorian took him to the ER, and the doctor called me to ask me to go through his stuff to find out what he had overdosed on. Turns out Max downed 40 painkillers over a 3-day period, which he had stolen from our host's home, who was disabled and on painkillers. They pumped his stomach, and on the next day, Max was discharged from the hospital. He then confronted me and was furious at me for going through his stuff as per the doctor and Lorian Fenton's orders. So I vacated the Airbnb we were all staying in and spent the remainder of my trip in a hotel. I did not talk to Max again for another year. At the next 2013 Super Soldier Summit in Vegas, I tried to convince myself I was no longer upset with Max's selfish and embarrassing behaviors. I decided to avoid him while focusing on myself. During this time, I finally got to meet my friends James Casbolt, who reclaimed us all being part of a mass MyLab abduction at the hotel we were staying in. I later had to remove the videos detailing his story, as it's a bit graphic and it involves many people who don't want to be named. After the summit, James Casbolt began to unravel mentally. He would post naked photos of his wife online for all to see in order to humiliate her. He accused Max and his wife of cheating, and things got very nasty. Tyler Clark pulled away from the disclosure movement, and after our core group of super soldier whistleblowers fell apart, a year later Casbolt was incarcerated, and 3 years later Max would die under mysterious means. All summits then came to a stop as Loren Fenton, spelled two different ways, typos, I believe, would no longer allow our craziness ruin her reputation. Eventually, I lost contact with Max after I blocked him on Facebook over a post he made in which he claimed he was a high vibration being and how I was full of dark energy. Max had a great stage presence. He had studied to be a Hollywood actor, and his college roommate was even Orlando Bloom. He was tall, handsome, good-looking, yet underneath it all, he was a very traumatized soul. When I learned Max died in 2016, I was surprised that I wasn't even sad. I knew he was troubled and had been seeking a way to check out for a very long time. As per our manifestations years ago, we were only partially able to achieve our desired disclosure goals. Though if Max could have gotten clean, I feel he probably would have still been with us today. In the end, I guess we both got what we needed from our relationship. succinct, more stable footing. Moving on to Chapter 20, Operational Records. Let's preview. Absolutely not. This has been a reading of Chapter 19, Super Soldier Talks, a book entitled Lone Wolf, Alpha Squad, Copy Over, by James Rink, read aloud by Digital Hawk. This has been a reading provided to you by Digital Hawk of Lone Wolf, Alpha Squad, Copy Over.